Picture a man riding through the streets of Paris on a bicycle, dressed in a cyclist's outfit with a pistol on his hip, living his life as a work of art. This was Alfred Jarry, born September 8, 1873. Born in Laval, Maine, to a mother who sold linens and an absent father, Jarry's childhood was marked by brilliance and eccentricity. By 15, he was already writing plays mocking his physics teacher, Ebert. That physics teacher would become immortalized as Père Ubu, one of literature's most grotesque and influential characters. Merdre, Ubu's opening word, shit with an extra R, caused riots at its 1896 premiere. Ubu Roi wasn't just a play. It was a demolition of theater itself. Jarry instructed actors to speak in monotones, to move like marionettes, to strip away all pretense of naturalism. The audience didn't know whether to riot or applaud. But Jarry's greatest creation wasn't Ubu. It was pataphysics, the science of imaginary solutions, which examines the laws governing exceptions. A science that places all things, real and imaginary, on the same plane of existence. Pataphysics goes beyond metaphysics as metaphysics goes beyond physics. It's the science of the particular, not the general. Every event is an exception. As Jarry wrote, reality is the exception to the exception. Jarry didn't just write about absurdity, he became it. He adopted Ubu's speech patterns in daily life, referred to himself in the third person as Père Ubu, and transformed his very existence into performance art. He was obsessed with cycling, seeing the bicycle as a symbol of modernity and freedom. He wrote for cycling magazines, raced competitively, and died partly from tuberculosis aggravated by cycling in all weather while drinking absinthe. Beyond Ubu, Jarry wrote The Supermale, a novel about a man who makes love 82 times in 24 hours and wins a 10,000-mile bicycle race against a locomotive. Technology, sexuality, and the limits of the human merged. In Days and Nights, Jarry explored the life of Sengel, a conscript who lives simultaneously in dream and waking states. The novel dissolves the boundary between consciousness and unconsciousness, anticipating surrealism by decades. His Caesar Antichrist presented the figure of the Antichrist not as evil incarnate but as the unity of opposites, Christ and Antichrist as one. Heresy became philosophy, blasphemy became metaphysics. Exploits and Opinions of Dr. Faustrol, Pataphysician, published posthumously, featured a doctor born at age 63 who navigates Paris in a sieve. Space becomes liquid, time becomes solid, logic becomes pataphysical. Jarry's prose was dense with puns, neologisms, mathematical formulas, and obscure references. He wrote as if language itself was a character to be twisted, stretched, and made to perform impossible acrobatics. Guillaume Apollinaire, who attended Ubu Roi's premiere, called Jarry a sublime drunkard. Jarry's destruction of theatrical convention directly inspired Apollinaire's own experimental works and the term Surrealism. André Breton and the Surrealists claimed Jarry as their predecessor. His systematic derangement of logic, his elevation of the unconscious, his black humor, all became Surrealist doctrine. The Dadaists saw in Ubu's Merdre the perfect anti-art battle cry. Tristan Tzara acknowledged Jarry as Dada's spiritual father, the first to make nonsense into a philosophical system. Antonin Artaud's Theatre of Cruelty owes everything to Jarry's assault on audience complacency. Jarry showed that theatre could be weapon, that art could wound, that performance could be violence. Samuel Beckett, who knew Jarry's work intimately, inherited his reduction of character to essence. Vladimir and Estragon are Ubu's descendants, humanity stripped to its absurd core. Eugene Ionesco explicitly acknowledged Jarry as the founder of the theater of the absurd. The meaningless conversations of the bald soprano echo Ubu's nonsensical pronouncements. Gilles Deleuze wrote that Jarry and Heidegger were engaged in the same project, the overcoming of metaphysics. But where Heidegger was serious, Jarry was laughing. Jarry's laughter was more profound than Heidegger's angst. For Deleuze, Jarry's pataphysics was a science of the virtual, not the possible, but the virtual in its pure state. Each exception creates its own rule, each event its own law. Philosophy through the looking glass. Jean Baudrillard saw in Jarry's pataphysics an anticipation of simulacra, the copy without original. Ubu is more real than the teacher he parodies. The exception becomes the rule. The fake becomes the real. In 1948, the Collège de Pataphysique was founded in Jarry's honor. Members included Ionesco, Max Ernst, Marcel Duchamp, Man Ray, Joan Miro. Pataphysics became an actual imaginary science. Frank Zappa, John Lennon, and Soft Machine all drew from Jarry. The Beatles' pataphysical phase. Zappa's absurdist rock operas, pop culture metabolizing Jarry's destruction of high and low art boundaries. Pablo Picasso designed sets for Ubu Productions. Max Ernst illustrated Jarry's works. Joan Miro painted Ubu. The visual arts found in Jarry permission to abandon representation for pure expression. In our age of alternative facts and virtual reality, Jarry seems prophetic. When reality itself becomes questionable, pataphysics becomes practical. The imaginary solution becomes the only solution. Jarry died on November 1, 1907, at age 34, destroyed by poverty, absinthe, and tuberculosis. His last request was for a toothpick. Even his death was a pataphysical gesture, mundane and profound simultaneously. As he lay dying, Jarry supposedly said, "I am dying. Please bring me a toothpick." Others report his last words as requesting wine. The uncertainty itself is pataphysical, multiple truths existing simultaneously. Jarry didn't just influence literature, he changed how we think about reality itself. He showed that the imaginary and the real are not opposites but accomplices in the construction of experience. Before Jarry, absurdity was something to be overcome. After Jarry, absurdity became a method, a philosophy, a way of being. He didn't describe the absurd, he invented it as a philosophical position. The Ubu plays, Ubu Roi, Ubu cuckolded, Ubu in chains, form a mythology of power and stupidity. Ubu is every tyrant, every bureaucrat, every small man drunk on authority. Ubu is eternally contemporary. Ubu anticipated fascism, totalitarianism, the banality of evil, a grotesque puppet spouting nonsense while committing atrocities. Jarry saw the 20th century coming and laughed at its horror. Jarry proved that language could be plastic, that words could be invented, that grammar was optional. James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake is unthinkable without Jarry's linguistic terrorism. In Jarry's universe, time flows backward, space bends, parallel lines meet, not as metaphor but as fact. Einstein's relativity has its literary precursor in Jarry's pataphysical spacetime. Jarry reimagined Christ's crucifixion as a bicycle race, complete with Pontius Pilate as race official. Blasphemy? or the recognition that all human activities, sacred and profane, are equally absurd? Jarry was fascinated by machines, bicycles, time machines, painting machines. He saw technology not as progress but as comedy. The machine as the ultimate pataphysical object, functional and absurd. In The Supermale, love-making becomes mechanical, Olympic, absurd. Jarry anticipated our age's transformation of intimacy into performance, sexuality into data, desire into algorithm. Jarry lived in an apartment with a ceiling so low he called it our great chasuble. He had to stoop or crawl. He painted it green and declared it perfect. Even architecture became pataphysical. Jarry's ultimate achievement was proving that philosophy could be lived, not just thought, that ideas could be performed, not just written, that existence itself could become art. Jarry lives on every time someone questions consensus reality, every time someone chooses the absurd over the rational, every time someone says, why not, instead of why. He is immortal through exception. God is the tangential point between zero and infinity. Jarry wrote this, lived this, became this. He remains our great teacher in the science of imaginary solutions, the patron saint of the impossible. Alfred Jarry, the man who made nonsense sacred, who turned stupidity into philosophy, who proved that the imaginary is more real than reality, forever cycling through the streets of eternity, pistol on his hip, laughing at the void,